Water from rain, water from snow, water on the land, too much water with no place to go. Down the Atlantic coast from Long Island to Florida, across the Gulf Coast from Florida to Texas, in the Ohio Valley, Missouri Valley, Mississippi Valley, in Michigan, Iowa, Oregon, and in many another state, water on the land, too much water, too many months each year. There are 127 million acres of wetland in the United States. 96 million of these acres have never been cleared for farming or open for the cultivation of crops. Someday, part of this land may be cropland, but most of it, 78 million acres of it, is not suitable for farming according to our present standards. Some of this land produces high-grade cypress timber. Much of it, though, will serve us best when left as it is in its natural state for the preservation and the propagation of wildlife. How about the rest of our wetlands? Today, on the farms of the nation, there are some 31 million acres that are either too wet for full production or too wet for any production at all. At one time or another, all of this land has been farmed. Some of it is still being farmed. But with too much water on top of the soil or too much water in the soil, results are rarely worthwhile. Many a farmer has turned his wetlands back to trees and brush. Yet, potentially, these wetlands are enormously rich lands, rich for farming and rich for grazing livestock. From their deep, fertile soil, someday we shall produce bumper crops of corn and potatoes, beans and tomatoes, and all the other foods and fibers we need and must have from day to day. Here is one of the last great frontiers of America, a frontier of promise, a frontier for new homes and for prosperous farms and families. It's going to be a big job, taking the surplus water from 31 million acres, for this is an area equal in size to all the land in Maine, Maryland, and Massachusetts. It's going to take a great deal of engineering skill, too, and a lot of hard work, for draining land isn't simple, and measurements have to be precise. If you take away too much water, the soil turns dry, and there isn't enough water left for thirsty crops. If you don't take enough away, well, that isn't good for crops either. Actually, drainage is a matter of good water management or water control. The engineer regards the land as a great water reservoir. And when he sets out to make the wetlands fit for production, he has to bring the water in the soil to just the right level. Not too much, not too little, but just right. Normally, there are two main ways of getting surplus water under control. One way is to dig drainage ditches like this, small lateral ditches in the fields, emptying into larger ditches, and these into still larger trunk ditches, and trunk ditches emptying into the rivers and bays. It's quite an operation. Sometimes the drainage channels have to be cut through swamps and sometimes through timber. The right-of-way has to be surveyed and the land cleared. There's a lot of dirt to move and sometimes trees and stumps. Private contractors are often called to handle the heavier operations. But all of this is part of the business of getting the land ready for farming, for production. with tile is another good way to get rid of surplus water. The tile are set end to end at the proper level below the ground surface, and the rows of tile have just enough slope so that water runs easily to the disposal ditches. Some places where the soil is suitable, engineers are using a device they call the mole. This lump of metal, shaped like a large sausage, is simply pulled through the ground by main force at the proper level, and you get a first-class water channel, all from one operation. Depending on the soil, these channels will last anywhere from 2 to 6 years. Every good drainage system requires care. Without it, the ditches fill with silt and clog with trees and brush. The idea is to keep the channel free and the water moving. Some of the old, narrow ditches with straight sidewalls clogged up completely. These can be made over into nearly flat V ditches, and when they're finished, the farmer can grow crops right down to the water's edge. Draining our wetlands is just another part of America's big job of soil conservation. Every acre of rich wetland brought into production, whether it was in a swamp or lying idle or just a trouble spot on the farm, whatever it was, it accomplishes at least two things when drained and put to use. It increases the total productive capacity of the country, and it takes the pressure off our steeper, poorer lands, the lands of only fair to medium yield that lose their soil so easily when forced to produce row crops like corn and cotton. Draining our wetlands will help us put our steep, poor lands into trees and grass for lumber, pulp, and pasture, the kind of production that suits them best. And the lands that once were wet will be producing our big food crops at low cost and without erosion. Soil Conservation Service technicians, armed with engineering skill and knowledge of soil, water, and crops, are at work on the wetlands, working with soil conservation districts, drainage districts, and private landowners to open up this new frontier of farmland of a richness and productivity unsurpassed.